Hi, Slim Doggy Steve here. I'm going to share a presentation that we did at BarkWorld 2013 entitled My Dog Ate What? This is meant to help you understand not only how much you should feed your dog, but also help you understand what you're feeding your dog. Before we get started, I want you to understand that incorrect feeding can cause some serious problems with your pet. And Dr. Ernie Ward, the founder of the Association for Pet Obesity Prevention, I think says it best in this quote. He says, "The most important decision that you make each day regarding your pet's health is what you feed it. What you pour into that bowl each morning has the greatest influence of anything else you will do to keep them healthy and living long." That's a pretty compelling statement and one that I totally agree with. You should know that in the context of this quote, Dr. Ward was talking probably more about how much as opposed to what. And what we're going to do is we're going to dive into both the how much and the what in this presentation. The key learnings are really twofold, or at least in two broad categories. The first one is around how much to feed your dog. We're going to give you some idea about how you might estimate your dog's daily calorie needs, and we'll point you to some tools that you could use to help you get there. And then secondly is mapping that estimation of daily calorie burn into proper serving sizes so that you're feeding your dog the correct amount given the brand of food that you use. The second part of the presentation is how to read and evaluate a dog food label. And there we're going to dig into some macronutrient analysis, macronutrients being protein, fat, and carbohydrates. We're going to share some really interesting statistics that we've collected through our dog food database of over 2,000 dog foods and treats. And we'll also dive into what we call the other ingredient categories. These are ingredient categories that are often included in commercially available dog food. And it's really important to understand how they fit and what to look for in those as well. Just a quick bio, a little bit about me. I am the founder of SlimDoggy.com. SlimDoggy.com is a website all about canine fitness, food, and weight management. We write weekly articles on dog food analysis and ingredient analysis, and we write weekly articles on canine fitness, especially our Fit Dog Friday blog hop, where we and other bloggers pool together to share tips and techniques and successes. We're the creator of the Slim Doggy app, which we describe as being the run keeper and Weight Watchers for dogs. It lets you track your dog's activity and your dog's feedings, translates them both into calories so that you can easily see if you are feeding the correct amount given your dog's weight goals. I'm a health and fitness enthusiast. I've been working out, most of my life. I'm a runner, I'm a CrossFitter, I do yoga, Pilates, and that philosophy has applied to my dogs as well, which is why my dogs are always in pretty good shape. And I am a dog lover and a rescuer. I've had dogs in my family for most of my 50 plus years, and we try to help when we can local rescues here in the Los Angeles area. Our inspiration behind Slim Doggy was a rescue lab that we brought into our home about 2 years ago. His name is Jack. Jack was huge. He was 105 pounds when we first got him. He was on Prozac for behavioral issues and Rimadyl for joint pain. He was essentially a train wreck, and he was unadoptable. He was in this shelter for over a year for his behavioral problems and because he was just too fat. We did a lot of research. We worked with our local veterinarians and came up with a program that we used for Jack that helped us figure out, given how active he was each day, what his proper feeding amounts should be so that he could safely lose about 20 pounds. And lo and behold, in about 3 months, Jack was down to about 85 pounds, and he's even a few pounds lighter these days. As he gets older, we like to try to keep him on the lighter side. But look at him now. What a big difference. He's an athlete. He's well behaved. He's just a real rescue success story. So Jack, thanks, because you're the inspiration behind everything that we've done around Slim Doggy. All right, so that's the background. Now let's get into the first part of the presentation. This is a fundamental question that, believe it or not, most people can't answer, and that is, how much should I feed my dog? You know, we have a pet obesity problem, as Dr. Ernie Ward has been saying now for several years. For dogs, it's about 53.5% of our dogs are overweight or obese. That's about 37 to 40 million dogs in this country. And not only does it lead to shorter lives and health problems, but it costs a lot of money. We estimate that owners of those 37 to 40 million dogs in the United States are spending somewhere around $8 billion each year on extra food, extra medicine, and extra medical care generally. That's a lot of money. And if that doesn't make you want to keep your dog fit and trim, how about this? Research suggests that a fat dog will live almost 2 years less than a thin dog or a trim dog. So those are two important facts to keep in mind. And if you think that feeding your dog a little extra is love, think again, please. So let's jump into it. How much should I feed my dog? Well, for some, I will say, unfortunately, it's all math. It really is. It's just math. Jack doesn't like bringing out the calculator too often. It knocks him out. But Jack, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Just like with humans, weight management is all about the difference between calories ingested and calories burned. If you're overweight, you have to make sure that the number of calories you burn each day is greater than or equal to the number of calories you eat each day. That's the only way to sustain a weight loss program. And for dogs, just like for people, there are three primary factors that determine how many calories, or kcals, you need each day. The first one is age, especially age when it comes to puppies. Dogs that are less than a year old are growing so fast that their bodies need a lot more calories than you would otherwise expect. So if you have a puppy, and by the way, you barely or rarely ever see a fat puppy, you are able to feed them a lot more than you would normally when they get older. The second primary factor is their weight, how big they are. And this is a big one. The size of the dog for metabolic processes required to sustain life alone accounts for a majority of the calories burned each day. In fact, for most dogs, that size of them, their size, their weight, their basal metabolism, as we say, is going to account for probably 80 to 90% of their daily calorie requirement. And then the third component is their activity or their exercise. And counter to the weight, most of the dogs will probably only burn around 10%, maybe 15% of their daily calories based on the activities that they do. Now, there are great exceptions here. Slim Doggy Jack, for example, who runs with me several times a week and goes out for multiple walks per day and plays, different kinds of games. He probably burns closer to 20 or 30% of his daily calorie burn. Sled dogs or agility dogs who are in active training can burn 30, 40, maybe even 50% of their daily calories through exercise. But for most normal dogs who go for a walk once a day, they're only going to burn probably 10% of their calories for activity. So what it means is, and we say this a lot in the human fitness industry, is that you cannot out-exercise a bad diet. I'm going to add a but, and I'm going to come back to that but in a few slides. So let's take a look at some examples. Here are three hypothetical dogs, 10, 40, and 70 pounds, and you can see in the chart how many calories they burn each day with different activity levels. You'll notice, and we'll take the center case, a 40-pound dog who averages 15 minutes of light activity like walking per day is going to burn somewhere around 820 calories. But only 30 of those calories are burned through exercise, through the 15 minutes of light activity. So that tells you a couple things. First of all, it tells you that 15 minutes of walking a day is actually not enough. We recommend a minimum of 30 minutes of vigorous activity each day on average. You can miss a day, fine, but on average you want to have at least 30 minutes of vigorous activity, health permitting. But nonetheless, even in that case, you're seeing that the activity calorie burn is still only about 50 calories, which is a small portion of the daily calorie burn. If you want to know how many calories your dog burns each day, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can look up the Waltham Center and try to figure it out yourself, or you could go to the Apple Store and download the Slim Doggy iPhone app, which will give you some very precise calculations. Or you can go to slimdoggy.com and look up the Slim Doggy widget, which can give you an estimate as well. But the bottom line is that you need to know how many calories your dog needs, because then you can figure out how to feed them correctly. Once you do have an estimate for your dog's daily calorie burn, in this case about 820 calories, you then can map your brand of food into proper serving size. And it really does matter. I mean, the range of calorie density for dog foods is extremely wide, and so you have to pay attention. And here's just an example. So here are two foods. One's Merrick French Country, and the other's Nature's Variety Lamb. These are both canned foods with very different calories per 8-ounce serving. To fulfill an 820 calorie per day requirement, you would need to feed 3.7 cups of the Merrick French Country food and only 2.4 cups of Nature's Variety. That's a big difference. And imagine if you were switching from Merrick to Nature's Variety and you kept feeding the same amount of cups per day. Well, that's going to cause a big problem because the Nature's Variety food is much more calorie dense. So if you did switch and you did not adjust the serving size, you'd be feeding about 3/4 of a can per day too much, which is not only way too many calories that would lead to a very fat dog, but also would be about 300 cans per year in extra food, which translates to probably somewhere around $600, $700, maybe $800 a year in extra food. The point is it matters, and you need to be precise with your calorie estimates as well as your feeding measurements. And oh, by the way, that analysis does not include treats. If you give your dog treats or scraps like most people do, you need to adjust your servings further. You cannot, in this case, feed a full 2.4 cups of Nature's Variety if you're giving out 30 Zook's treats. It's just not going to work. You're going to end up with a fat dog. So the three tips that we use and tell people to think about when they're trying to figure out how much to feed their dog. The first one is check your dog food's calories, check the units as well, and make sure you understand what a serving, a cup, or a half a cup, or an ounce is providing them in terms of calories. The second thing we like to say is never rely on the food label to tell you exactly how much to feed. These instructions are too generic. They most likely don't apply to your specific case, whether it's because your dog is more or less active than average, or it's because your dog is in between the weight ranges that they present on the label. In any case, these instructions are just not good enough. And if you want a proof point, just think about the fact that more than half of our dogs in this country are overweight or obese. I'm going to give a 2A, which isn't on the presentation slide, but as I said earlier, you have to account for treats. You can't just assume that those are 0-calorie treats because they're not. So you have to adjust your feedings there. And the last one is around exercise. So yeah, for most dogs, exercise only accounts for somewhere around 10% of their daily burn. But in the long run, this is the difference. Exercise is the difference between a fat or an obese dog and a normal dog. In our example, that 40-pound dog that was exercising for only 15 minutes a day, if that dog stopped that exercise, so they did none of that, so they didn't go for walks anymore, and the owner kept feeding them the same amount, the 820 calories, over the course of a year, that dog would gain somewhere around 3 pounds, which, by the way, is almost 10% of their body weight. So this is the problem, and this is where exercise really helps. Besides it helping with behavioral issues, exercise provides that margin that enables your dog to sustain a healthy weight in the long run. And it's exactly the same for people. Implicit in these tips, which I didn't lay out on the tip section, is you have to measure. So if you know how much calories your dog burns, if you know how many calories per cup your food is, you still have to measure. So a cup means 8 ounces. Get a measuring cup or use a smart feeder or both to make sure that the cup is the cup. Let's take a look at, just for some perspective, we have a database of a couple thousand dog foods and treats, and we ran an analysis just to see, on average, how many calories per cup do dry and dog foods have. And you can see that the dry food is actually significantly higher in calories per cup. On average, a cup of dry food is about 385 calories compared to a cup of an average can, which is about 286 calories. The chart shows the distribution. I'm a statistics lover, and you can see that most of the food is between 200 and 400 calories per cup. You have a few outliers where they're much more calorie dense. If you, by chance, are using those foods, you've got to be extra cautious with how much you feed them. Now, knowing how much to feed is absolutely crucial to ensure that your dog maintains a healthy weight. But it's only part of the story. You also need to know what you are feeding your dog. And you need to know that so that you can evaluate whether or not the food that you're serving them is the right food for your budget. The commercial dog food industry, which has evolved a lot, and I'm happy to say over the last probably decade, has been introduced to new brands and new types of recipes that seem to have better ingredients and better recipes. But there's still a lot of foods out there that contain ingredients that if you looked at them and knew what they were, you would scratch your head and hopefully change the brand or the recipe that you're using. So the next part of this presentation is all about helping you understand what you're feeding your dog, how to look at a label, how to look at ingredients and figure out, is it good? Is it the right food for my dog, given my budget?